So I'm very pleased and happy to present to you tonight Reverend Twanda Prelow. She is a native of the city of Baltimore, Maryland. She is an elder in the United Methodist denomination, currently serving at Christ United Methodist Church in Baltimore City. She serves on the BWC Baltimore District Committee on Ordained Ministry, BWC Health and Wellness Board, Clergy Care and Intensive and Treatment, and then she's treasurer for the Black Clergy Women of the Baltimore Washington Conference and historian for the National Black Clergy Women. She has a passion and a love for self-care and finances. She is an ICF trained coach since 2013. She is a coach facilitator for the Mid-Atlantic United Methodist Foundation, that's us, coaching individuals and churches in finances. She is a graduate of Morgan State University and the Lancaster Theological Seminary. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting and a Master's of Divinity degree. And she's completed the clinical pastoral education at York County Hospital in Pennsylvania. And currently she's a student at Messiah University pursuing a doctorate in mental health counseling, a degree in mental health counseling. Pastor Prelow took a 3-month sabbatical leave and recently published her first book. I won't say I was one of the inspirations, but I was one of the people sort of pushing her towards the end line there. So I did not do anything about it. Called Breathe. Do you have a copy of it you can show us right here? I just ordered it right off Amazon, Twanda. Okay, next time I'll have that for you. I'm a big fan of Twanda's. The book is great. I just got it off of Amazon. She said that she would autograph it for me next time I see her. But it's Breathe, a Pastor's Journey to Wholeness. So it is available on Amazon. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to Reverend Twanda. You guys are in for a treat. And we're so happy to have Reverend Twanda Prelow tonight. Take it away, Twanda. You need to unmute first. Unmute yourself. Did you unmute you? Right there. Press the unmute. You got it? Okay.
Got it.
And see if you can share the screen.
Yes. I'm gonna share my screen. I just want to say first that I just thank you for the opportunity of being here with the Mid-Atlantic Foundation and the Financial Leadership Academy. I actually went through the Leadership Academy and I was actually in their first group a couple of years ago. And also, I just want to just talk about the Mid-Atlantic Foundation, how it sponsors the Financial Leadership Academy, in which there are currently 90 students, including a group of district superintendents. And so they have experienced the value of the Financial Leadership Academy and want to be supportive of congregations in their district. So we thank God for Reverend Salz and her participation in the Financial Leadership Academy, and how because of her participation, it has provided you all the opportunity for this workshop and all the other workshops to come. So we hope you all participate in those as well. So thank your district superintendent for caring deeply about the financial health of the district churches. And so we thank God for Frank. We thank God for Jack, he spoke, and just Annabelle, and just the work they do to empower our churches to do the work of the mission. I'm going to share my PowerPoint at this time. I'm going to share it at this time. So during this time, you might see me kind of looking off to the side, and that's because my notes are off to the side. So if you see me kind of glancing off to the side, my notes are off to the side. And so thank you again for this workshop on using vision and mission budgets in your church and in your congregation. And so hopefully this will empower you and give you resources to take back to your church and your finance team when it comes to budgets with vision and mission attached to it. So this will teach you how to align a congregation's budget with the vision and the mission of the church. So I do want to start off with this, and that is, let's talk about just the biblical foundation, the biblical theological foundation when it comes to vision. And so when we look at Proverbs 28:18, Proverbs 28:18 said, where there is no prophecy, the people cast off restraint. But, and I have this thing over top of my, but happy are those who keep the law. Happy are those who keep the law. And you know what? I'm always glad when I'm talking to pastors because pastors understand the text. Right? So it's always good when I'm talking to pastors. And so when we look at the Message Bible, the Message version of this, it said, if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. But when they attend to what he reveals, they are most blessed. And when I look at the text, I'm going to tell you what it reminds me of. A couple of years ago, I'll say, 4 or 5, I think I'm 5 years into the congregation in which I am in now. One of my members, and I'm the type of person where when I see a vision, I'm kind of like beeline into it. God has showed me what God want me to do. And sometimes I'm like going towards it. And sometimes I have to remember that people are following me and they need to catch the vision. So the text says that if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. And I have to be reminded that my people need to catch the vision. So it reminded me of in this congregation when I first started, and I'm moving along, and one of my members said to me and pulled me to the side, Pastor, I know you know where you're going, but we need to know where you're going, right? So it says if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble over themselves. And so Webster definition says the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom, with imagination or wisdom. Okay, so let's look at the biblical theological foundation of mission. We all know the Great Commission, go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. And I always like to start with this vision and the biblical foundation of the vision and the mission, because we're trying to line that up with our budget. The Message version says, Jesus, undeterred, went right ahead and gave his charge. God authorized and commanded me to commission you. Go out and train everyone you meet far and near in this way of life, marking them by baptism and the threefold name, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Then instruct them in the practice of all I have commanded you. I am with you as you do this, day after day after day, right to the end of the age. And so Webster defines mission as a body of persons sent to perform a service of carrying on an activity. And so I want to share this. I want to share this about Disney. I want to share this about Disney. There it is. I want to share this about Disney. So let me just say this. I thought this was a powerful demonstration of when it comes to lining your vision and your mission up to what it is that you're doing. So when I look at this, I look at Walt Disney and how did Walt Disney carry out their mission and their vision? What was Walt Disney's vision or mission, and how did they carry it out? How did he encourage his employees to carry it out? So let me play this video for you.
60 years ago, challenged his staff with one simple sentence. The sentence was, find a way every single day to take 5 minutes and create a memory for one of our guests. Create that moment, the magical moment that will live with them their entire lives. Take 5 minutes every single day and do that. I had a chance to take my daughters to Disneyland. I'll never forget this. I mean, so many moments the staff created and the place created, the atmosphere created. But one moment, we were on the line for the ride, Soarin', and we got right to the front of the line. And it happened to be the exact day of my daughter Ella's 5th birthday. She had this button on that said, today's my birthday. And the woman working there looked at her and said, it's your birthday? And she said, do you know what that means? That means you can help be in charge of the ride. You can help run the ride. You want to help me run the ride? And she called my daughter over to the other side of the computer terminal and pointed out how my daughter would help run the ride. And she said, do you see that little computer screen, that little monitor? When the doors open there, that means the ride is over. And the people that are on right now, they'll be getting off. When those doors on that screen open, they're getting off. She said, when that happens, you're going to get to push this button right here. She showed her the button. And she said, well, wait, watch the screen, wait till the doors open. And my daughter watched and watched and watched the screen until the doors opened. And then she pushed that button and our doors opened so we could go and join the ride. This woman got Walt Disney's point. As a leader, as a parent, what do you do to communicate your vision so that it's so clear, so concise, that a decade after you've talked about it, maybe even 60 years after you talked about it, it's still impacting lives. It's still having a ripple effect.
I want to ask you a question that he said in the video, and that is, what do you do to communicate your vision and your mission to the church that it is so clear and it is so concise? So I want you to write this down, write these words that I want you to remember these words out of this video. Create memory. Create memory. Right? And when you create memory, people don't remember numbers. What you're doing is you're attaching a living witness to your monetary resources so that people are not remembering just dollar and cents, but they are remembering that you're attaching a living witness to your monetary resources. Create memory. That's what this is about. Create. So I want to ask you a question. What's your vision and your mission? What's your church's vision and mission? Now, if we were all together, I will put you into some small groups and have you talk about your vision and your mission. But since we're not together, I want to ask this question, and you can put this in the chat. I want to know if somebody have a vision and a mission for your church that it is so short, it's short and sweet. You know, it's short. What's your vision and your mission statement? If it's real short, if you can just write it in the chat, right? And how many of you can state your church's mission and vision statement by heart? Can you state your church's vision and mission statement by heart? And can somebody in your church, you can walk up to anybody in your church and say, what's our vision, our mission statement? Because I'm reminded of the book of Habakkuk. I'm actually preaching from that book this month, in the 2nd chapter, say, write the vision, make it clear so that a runner could read it. And different versions, you interpret that different. One makes it seem like a runner will take that vision and run with it, or a runner that's running can actually look at that vision as they running and catch the vision as they're actually running. They can catch the vision. So I'm not sure if anybody put anything in the chat. Let me just check and see if somebody put their vision or mission in the chat, that it is so short and sweet and concise that if a runner ran past your church, they caught it. And I'm a runner. Well, I used to be. It's been a couple of years. Right? It's been a couple of years. But I explained this like this, that if I was running and I was running a half marathon and I got to the 5th mile and I'm running, and a lot of time runners try to beat their time, and I saw something cross the highway that said, "Eat fresh." And I just saw it in my running and just kept on going. And when I got to the end and me and my friends are cheering and they saying, "Hey, where can we go eat?" And I go, at mile 5, I saw a sign that said, "Eat fresh." I caught what it is that they were trying to say. So I see some stuff in the chat.
We got three so far.
Okay. Linda said, ours is at the heart of it all. I like that, at the heart of it all. That's it, at the heart of it all. And Crystal said, to be the servant church of Jesus Christ is the vision. We caught that, right? To reach up by serving God, to reach in by serving the church, to reach out by serving the community. What does that tell us? They're going to reach up, in, and out. You see how fast I caught that? Up, in, and out. That's their mission of the church. Annabelle said, my church vision is be like Jesus, and our mission is make disciples. Clear and concise. Clear and concise. So I want to say, let me just kind of give you a story that the first church that I served, myself and the senior pastor, and with some of our leaders came up with this mission of the church. But let me tell you, it was long. It was long. The congregation memorized it, but it was long. It was long. We want to be clear and concise. We want to be clear and concise. And so let me say this. It's moving these PowerPoint sometimes. There you go.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Okay, so how do you communicate your vision and your mission? How do you share your vision and your mission to your congregation? So one of the ways that we can share our vision and our mission is a banner across the front of the church, on the outside of the church. These are just ways that we share our vision and our mission to the congregation. You can share it in your bulletin. You can share it in your bulletin. We have an email that goes out, and it's across the top of the email. It goes, especially during the pandemic, it's in every email that goes out. And that is forward focus, because that's what we're about in this season. And that's all it says is forward focus. And so bulletin, banner, you can share it, website, you can put it on your website. But how many of you have ever thought about sharing your vision and your mission to your congregation through your budget? And that's a way to share our vision and our mission through narrative budgets. And let me share this. Cliff
Christopher.
Yeah, Cliff Christopher, and I'm just going to my notes. He said, because the number one reason people give is a belief in your mission. A belief in your mission. 99% of your people really don't care about the line budget. They just want to know if you're changing lives with the money in which they have given. And really, a lot of times when people see, I don't know about your congregations, but when people do see the line item budget, a lot of times it sparks so many unnecessary conversations. It does. So what is a church budget? The church budget is an expression of a church's commitment to its mission. The church budget is an expression of a church's commitment to its mission. It is a ministry action plan of what the congregation believes God has called us to do. Let me say that again. The church budget is an expression of a church's commitment to its mission. It is a ministry action plan of what the congregation believe God has called us to do. That's why it's always important to keep that vision and that mission in front of you when you're doing a church budget. Keep that in front of you. Keep it in front of you when you're doing your church budget. So the church budget, according to the 2017-2020 Finance Guidebook, the discipline give the Committee on Finance the duty of compiling annually a complete budget for the church and submitting it to the church council for review and adoption. And I have to tell you that when I was doing this workshop for another group of pastors, I was surprised at how many of them said that they did not have a budget process and the church did not have a budget. And they did not have a budget process. It also states, start the annual budgeting process with a period of time dedicated to discerning God's plan for the coming year instead of assuming that they know what the budget should include. And the Committee of Finance opens up the process of budgeting to the entire congregation rather than setting the budget in a secretive, behind closed door manner. So let's talk about the budget process. I want to know, and if you can write in the chat, whether or not your church have a budget process. Just let me know. Just say yes or no, whether or not you have a budget process, and just be honest. I mean, if you don't have a budget process, say no. That's what we're here for. We're here to learn the importance of it. But do your church have a budget process? I want to see what's coming through in the chat. Do you? Yes, yes, yes. Do your church have a budget process? Yes. That's good. That's good. I see 4 yeses. Yes. That's good. That is really good. Let me tell you, that is good. It's good to see it. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeses. It's about 11 of us on here. Yes, that is good. That is good. I'm seeing that churches have a budget process. That's good. That is really good. Let me ask this question. How many churches on here, your church already present a narrative budget? Do you already present? Let me see some yeses and stuff in the chat. You know, if we were in church, you know how we say, talk back to me? Somebody say, oh, no, not yet. Looking to transition this year. That's good. Looking to transition in this year. Not yet. No. That's good. That's good. Thank you for your feedback. That's good. That's good. So that's good. So this workshop is for you so that you will create memory, that you will create memory for your congregation when it comes to the finances of the church. Okay, so let's talk about that narrative budget. So let's talk about what is a narrative budget. So a narrative budget, let me go back. There you go. It communicates to your congregation how you are changing lives through their monetary gifts. And it tells the untold story of your congregation. Every congregation have an untold story. And your narrative budget gives you an opportunity to tell the untold story of your congregation. It tells the untold story. I remember, and this was even before I went to seminary, I was working for a college. And first I was actually attending that college, and I was doing a master's in ministry. This is before I got a master's of divinity. And so I was working for this college, and I was attending, and then I started working for the college, and I worked in their stewardship department. And every month, what they would do is they will send out letters to their donors, and it was thanking them for their gifts that they had given to the institution, but attached to that was always a story about the impact that they were making in the lives of one of the students at that institution. And I never thought about that until I started doing narrative budgets. And I said, you know what? They were creating memory. They were creating memory in the minds of their donors. And that's what a narrative budget does. It creates memory for your congregation. It also attaches a living witness to your monetary resources. It attaches a living witness. That's what that institution was doing. They was attaching a living witness to their monetary resources. We send out a quarterly thank you to all of our members in our congregation. We send it out quarterly. And what I started doing is when we send it out, I attach something to it. Because of your gift, this is what we are doing in the congregation. And I try to highlight something that we have done in the congregation in that quarter. Because of your gift, we have been able to feed these amount of people. Because of your gift, this is happening. And I always try to do that. So a narrative budget communicates to your congregation how the church accomplished its mission in the previous year. That's what it does. It communicates to your congregation how the church accomplished its mission in the previous year. And it also points you to the future of the coming year by attaching vision to the budget. It attached vision to the budget. This is what we see in the coming year. Instead of just giving out dollars and, giving out figures, this is what we need in the coming year. This is what we see. That's a possibility of how God operates. This is what we see for our congregation in the coming year. Okay, so why a narrative budget? Much of scripture is the sacred story of God's care for his people. And when we look at Exodus 16 and the manna from heaven and how God cared for them with manna, much of scripture is the sacred story of God's care for his people. And just as individuals have sacred stories of God's providential care for them, a narrative budget is the sacred story of our church's ministry and how God are given through their church and how people are given through their church to touch the lives of other people. It's the sacred story of your congregation. Just take a moment right now and just think about what is the sacred story of your congregation in 2020. A time when we when we have been forced to close our doors and we haven't had that physical contact with each other. And I know certain churches in certain areas, it's a little different. Some are back in their buildings, but every congregation have a sacred story. And so a narrative budget is the sacred story of our church's ministry and how people are giving through their church to touch the lives of other people. Look at the Red Cross. If you look at this website, just something that I highlighted in this website, the biggest thing that stands out is when Curry lost everything to fire, the Red Cross was there. Help people affected by disasters, big and small. Will you donate? But what's not huge on that screen is the Red Cross is in need of money. And if we don't make this budget, we're going to be forced to close our doors next year. That's not communicated when we look at this. When we look at this about the Red Cross, let me go to the next one. Here's another one, Armed Corps. Immediately we see how Armed Corps is touching the lives of others. That's what we see. Changes to Armed Corps relief supply kits empower communities. And red, right up on the side of the screen, is the word donate. But what's not on the screen is Armed Corps needs your money, right? Because if you don't give to Armed Corps, we're going to be forced to close our doors next year. No, what they want us to know is the impact that they are making on the lives of others. So this is why we do narrative budgets. This is just another part of their website. They have donate there, but they also showing this is the narrative of their organization. Disaster response, hunger and poverty, global health, sustainable development, relief supply network, WASH advance. They're telling us what the organization is about, right? They're creating in our mind memory. So that when I begin to think about maybe hunger and poverty, I begin to think about, wait a minute, I saw that Armed Corps does that. So let's talk about creating a narrative budget. Let's talk about creating a narrative. And let me say this, creating your story. Let's talk about creating your story, creating that narrative budget. How can we create memory? Remember I said, I want you to remember those two words, create memory. How can we create memory for our congregations? So I want to tell you, I want to start off with what it is that's needed to do that. And that is, you need a line item budget. You need an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document or a document editor. Because remember, and you need to remember that you are creating a story. You have to remember that you are creating a story. So and this takes some work. It takes some work from your finance person. It takes some work from your committee coming together. This is not something that we do on our own. We gather our committee together to do this because we want to create story, and we want to know those stories. What is the sacred story in our congregation around our monetary resources? Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that line item budget, but you're going to select ministry categories. I don't know how many of you in your congregation, I know with my congregation, we are divided into segments. So we have our worship, and we trying to get away from committee, and we starting to use the word team. So we have our worship team, education team or spiritual formation team, your mission or outreach team, fellowship team, and pastoral care team. And so with these teams, each ministry in the church fall under one of these categories. Now, this is important because we're creating this narrative budget. But you have to first, by selecting these ministry categories, and some churches call it different things. Some churches call these categories, they have different phrases for it. So your worship, so select these categories, and these categories will match your budget categories. So I say worship, education, mission, fellowship, and pastoral care. For an example, some churches, you have worship and music, education, spiritual formation, membership, small groups, pastoral compensation, staff parish relations, property, programs, and communications. So this is just a sample of a line item budget. This is, and my church's budget, and I'm just going to bring it up. I'm not going to go through, monetary, what's monetary on here, but just to give you some of the line item on my church's budget, line item budget. So on ours, we have stuff like lay leadership, lay leader annual conference. We have programming, finance committee, newsletter, tape ministry, supplies, publicity, bulletin boards, website, altar flowers, bereavement, pulpit honorarium, music ministry, dance ministry. This is some of the stuff that's on our line item budget. Easter, Good Friday, Christmas, New Year's Eve, Afrocentric days, friends and family days, and yours look different. Property maintenance. This is some stuff that's on my line item budget, my line item church budget. So all line items are assigned or split up into one of the categories and which I mentioned before. So you're going to take what's in your line item, and you're going to match everything on your line item to one of the categories, 4 or 6 categories that I mentioned: worship, education, mission, fellowship, pastoral care. And what category I did not mention when I talked about this, and I did not mention administration. Now you're flexible on this. I'm just showing you one way to do it. You didn't see administration on this. And that's because administration is going to be divided, and administration is going to go into one of these categories. It's going to be in worship. It could be in education. It could be divided. Some of it can be in mission. Some of it can be in fellowship. Some of it can be in pastoral care. Because our administration is done in all of these categories. The administration of the church. And then we're going to create, this is where your Excel spreadsheet comes in. And I'm going to show you all examples of this. If we were together, I would have handed you, I would have given you handouts so that you could actually be looking at it. But I'm going to show you examples as we get further down. So you're going to take your Excel spreadsheet, and you're going to do You're going to create a column for each category. You're going to create a column for each category. And you're going to format the cells as percentages. You're going to create a column for each category and format the cells as percentages. And then you're going to distribute those line items. You're going to distribute that across the categories. So you're going to distribute pastoral costs by percentage of time across the categories, because we fall in a whole lot of those categories. And you just don't want to show on this narrative budget just a whole column that just says pastoral, because we fall in all of those categories. We are in worship, education, mission, and fellowship, and pastoral care. We are in all of those categories. And you're going to distribute percentages of line items into category columns. Some of them will be easy, but some of them you're really going to have to think them through. Like Sunday school supplies to education. And it's going to really take you being just a little bit more detailed when it comes to your line item budget. My church's line item budget is very detailed. It's very detailed. I mean, ours, it just doesn't say utilities when it, for the church. It says gas and electric, water. It's very detailed on our budget. So here's an example of ministry. I have a question, just one moment. Of ministry percentages example. I thought I had a question. Okay. All right. So here are some examples. Ministry percentages example. A pastor might spend their time in this manner: 30% on worship, 15% on education, 10% on mission, 10% on fellowship, 20% on pastoral care. So this might be how you can see the pastor time being divided into these categories. And this distribution will inform other expense lines. And even building usage may impact some of the expenses. And that's if your church is going really detailed when it comes to your building usage. This really, if you keep these good records during the year, when it comes to the end of the year and we want to begin, and even quarterly, when we want to create memory in the minds of our congregation, it will be easy for us to just go and hit some numbers, fill in stuff with, from our line item. Now, we're not doing away with the line item budget. We're not doing away with the line item budget, but we can take that line item budget and make it and create memory into the minds of our congregation. So here goes some examples of some percentages allocations. Some examples. So we see worship, 100% in worship, Christian ed and spiritual formation. We see that 100%, mission. But then if you look down at the bottom, we see what made that 100%. We see pastoral compensation, staff parish, property. No, I'm sorry. We see the pastoral compensation divided into those categories. I'm sorry. We see it divided into those categories: 35% worship, 20% education, 10% mission. We see it across the board. We see the same thing for staff parish relations and other staff divided among those categories. We see property costs, church costs divided among those categories, and program and communication divided among those categories. Now, you might have more because your line item budget probably is longer than this. Mine's is longer than this. So the line item budget is on one side, and you see where it's divided into those particular categories. And so ministry category totals, we can add another set of ministry category columns. And so what we're going to do is multiply the percentage column by the budget line amount. And that will give us the total ministry categories column. And the column totals are ministry category totals. And I'm gonna give you an example of that in the next slide. So let's look at the next slide. Now, do you see how this now comes up to dollars and cents? This comes up to dollars and cents. So we see worship, education, mission, and pastoral care. And that would say fellowship. My fellowship is up at the top. It would be fellowship. So then we can take 29% of the budget was worship, 24% of the budget education, 22% of the budget mission, 14% pastoral care, and 11% fellowship. And let me just stop right here. Any questions? Let me just go back one. Just take a look at this line item right here. Remember, we're going to create memory. We're creating memory. Now, let me go to the next one. So we took the information from our line item budget, put it into categories on this spreadsheet with percentages. And so we're going to select those category totals to create a pie chart. So now we see, as I was saying, 11% pastoral care, 29% worship, 24% education, 22% mission. We see that fellowship category. We see that fellowship category, which was 14%. I'm sorry, fellowship was 11%. This kind of off a little. So we create that pie chart. And so when we create that pie chart, then your givers can translate their giving. 11% of every dollar I give goes to pastoral care. 22% of every dollar I give goes to mission. And the pie chart can lead to congregational self-evaluation and affirmation. So we can look at our pie chart and see where the money is going, not by the dollars and cents, but it kind of gives an overall picture of where the money is going in the congregation. And then we can affirm that. We can affirm what we're doing. And then we begin to tell the story. And what we do is we share a description and a story about the ministry category. We share a description and a story about the ministry category. So what's happening? What's your sacred story in your congregation around worship? And all of us have a sacred story when it comes to worship. Think about the pandemic. with worship and how God has allowed us to worship in this pandemic. What's the sacred story of your congregation when it comes to worship? Tell that story. You're creating memory in the minds of your people in your congregation. And you're going to do that with each category, with each category. So let me give you an example. So let's say it was the pastoral care narrative. Taking communion to 3 local nursing homes each month. Let's say that's the narrative. On call at 2 local hospitals and follow-up care for parishioners recovering from illness or surgery. We creating that story. Preparation with the members for baptism and weddings. And that story can come out with a story, not just saying taking communion to the 3 local nursing homes. What is a story that happened when you took communion to the nursing home? I went to the nursing home and I was given communion to one of our members at a nursing home, and somebody in the next room asked me, could I give communion to them? And I wound up giving communion to them and their family who was in there with them. You know, what is the sacred story? Not just taking communion, but there's a sacred story behind taking communion. And you begin to tell that story with those percentages. So our sacred story, we're going to watch for God in the events. C.H. Spurgeon said, watch for God in the events of your life. God is still operating in our congregations and the life of our people. Everybody have a sacred story. And I just want to pause for a moment and just a minute, just one moment, and just have you think, what is the sacred story of your congregation during this pandemic? And let me go back up. I'm not going to take this slide up, but I'm going to bring out one of these categories. What is the sacred story of your congregation around worship, around education, around mission and fellowship and pastoral care during this pandemic? If I was to think of the sacred story of education, I would just think about the sacred story of discipleship and how God is allowing us to come together on Zoom, and how we probably have more people on Zoom in Bible study than we did when we were not in the pandemic. And then I will give a story about maybe a person in my congregation who talked about the impact and how the fact that we're still doing Bible study, how they're growing in their relationship with God in the midst of the pandemic. That's a sacred story. And that's under the discipleship of the church. So just think, I just want you to think, put a sacred story. Think about a story in your congregation under worship. People need to know those stories. When it comes to what did the church spend in 2020, people need to know the stories of your people. The sacred stories behind the dollars and the cents. And we want to give them sacred stories. Real people with real stories. Real people with real stories. Let me go in the chat. Crystal said, thank you, Crystal. Reaching in and out to help people through the pandemic through cards, calls, and giving of money for a meal, running errands for seniors. That's a sacred story. So in the midst of the pandemic, they are providing financial resources. They are running errands for seniors. They are sending out cards, phone calls. That's the sacred story of the congregation. And Crystal, I would go just a little further with a testimony. I would go a little further with a testimony. Real people, real stories. I would just push it just a little further with a testimony. Ask somebody, what was the impact of that on them during this pandemic? And you will be surprised that somebody in your congregation will give a story of how much they were out, and I didn't have this. My husband lost his job, and we were going to wonder how we were going to make it through the pandemic with feeding, our children. And because of the meals that we've been receiving from the church, it has allowed us to keep food on our table. So I would just go a little further. Real people, real stories. The pictures that you see right now is our church in ministry. The picture that you see is our church in ministry. One of my members delivering something, and this was actually in North Carolina. They had collected this tarp and took it down to somebody who actually needed it in North Carolina. The picture that you see in the bottom is some group of members from our congregation who go to the Manor House once a month and feed with their breakfast club. And this was not during the pandemic. This was before the pandemic. I just pulled some pictures. But we need pictures of real people, real stories. Givers experience the impact the ministry of the church has on people's lives when we do real people with real stories. And experience shows they become inspired and takes greater ownership of the ministries. I see another comment. That's right. Somebody said their church started a food giveaway. These are the stories of your congregation, and you need to get the story out. People need to know the stories of the congregation, and you might be getting it out through the bulletin. You might be getting it out other ways. Wait a minute, I have another comment. Weekly with a drive up and a handout. They have drive up and a handout. Thank you for sharing that. What are some other sacred stories? So we get the story out by our church newsletter, bulletin inserts, church website, store ship mailings, narrative budget booklets, personal contact, and we can also include it in prayers. These are ways that we can get the story out to our congregations. Okay, let's look at worship narratives. Put a bulletin insert out each week for 6 weeks, highlighting a different category of the ministry. One of those categories that we talked about. Put a bulletin insert out each week for 6 weeks, highlighting a different category of the ministry. Pray for that ministry. This is the worship narrative. Tell a specific story of a person being touched by that ministry. And these are the ministries that we're talking about. We're talking about the 4 different categories that I talked about: fellowship, mission, education, worship, pastoral care. Yours might look a little different. Highlight one of them narratives. This could be the worship narrative. And then volunteer time. We can include volunteer time in that. And here's an example of volunteer time, a calculation of volunteer time. Sunday morning worship. Sunday morning worship when it comes to your greeters. Greeters, fellowship hosts, coffee makers, 4 to 8 persons times 8 times 1.8, 1.5 hours equal 12 hours. This is the way we can kind of tell a story of our volunteers. Liturgists, communion service, counters, ushers. 10 times 1.5 hours equal 15 hours. Choir. Almost 70 hours of servant time in 1 week times 52 weeks equals 3,640 hours of time given for Sunday morning worship alone. Tell the story. In an average sized church, when all ministries are considered, a reasonable estimate of 10 to 15,000 volunteer hours per year. And that's a significant impact on any local community. How do we tell that story? And I said this in the beginning, and I keep saying that: create memory in the minds of your people. Here's a few recommendations. Leave the line item budget in the church office and take only your narrative budget to your church council meeting. And I'm gonna give you an example of a narrative budget, of how it could look. We kind of went through how we can put it together, but I wanna give you an example of how it looks. So take only there's some feedback recommendation. Take only the narrative budget to your church council. Leave the line item budget in the church. In the church office. If somebody asks for it, it's available. Keep 5 copies of the completed line item budget available in the church office. So if somebody say they want to see the line item budget, but hopefully it'll get to the point that you're showing this narrative budget so much that people don't want to see the line item budget because they're seeing more of the impact that the monetary resources are having. Be determined to talk about money and ministry in a new way. I like now we use the word mission shares for apportionments. I like that. So you say, where would mission shares go? It would go in missions. So it gives us another way to talk about apportionments. Because sometimes people think it just goes to our annual conference. No, it goes towards mission, to fulfill the mission of the church. And the process continues. And each year, review, update, and expand upon the stories and talent recognition. Or the gifts, recognizing people gifts. Expand upon that every year. And people will begin to think of the church ministry funding as ministry. That's why I say if you leave it in the church office, the line item budget, and just bring out the narrative budget and tell the story of the congregation, hopefully it'll get to the point where people are no longer asking about their line item budget. What they want to know is what impact did we make? People begin to think of church funding as ministry. Giving doesn't just make a difference. It can make all the difference. Just doesn't make a difference. It makes all the difference. And I'm hoping from this, you all have just a picture of how you can put together a narrative budget. So let me show you what a narrative budget could look like. So we talked about the administration part, about putting it all together, getting the numbers together, putting percentages on a spreadsheet, putting stuff into categories and stuff like that, this process of putting it together. But how would it look when I give it to the congregation? Because it's not only going to look like that pie chart the percentage here, it's not going to look like that. You can get creative and in the way in which you want to give this to your congregation. So let's look at some creative ways in which churches have given their narrative budget to their congregation. Look at this. 2018 narrative budget. Zionville United Methodist Church. And look how this church look at this. So they have $285,000 in worship, $189,000 in Christian education and discipleship. Now you can decide that you want to give the dollar amount, or you can decide that you want to give percentages. Some people give dollar amounts, some people give the percentages. $176,000 to outreach, $89,000 is congregational care, $247,000 support systems, $414,000 facility, for $1,398,000. But what you don't see on here is the pastor's salary, right? You don't see, you don't see how much it took us for our gas and electric bill. You don't see that stuff on here. What you see is mission, and you see the vision of the church. So how did we get to our $1,398,000? How did we get to that? And if I can read, I want to bring something I have close to me right here on my side. And I just want to read what they have for worship. It says, worship is one of the primary ministries of any church. Strong music, solid preaching, and a meaningful sacramental life. These are just a few of the many ways we offer ourselves to God. Zionville United Methodist Church is blessed to have 2 different worship services. They telling the story of the congregation and where we spend that $283,000. Zionville United Methodist Church is blessed to have 2 different worship styles to offer those who walk through our doors. Celebrations include successful transition of pastors, sending the past. Let me read this. For those people who cannot join us in person on Sunday morning, we now live stream. They telling the story of the congregation and where that money is going. Let me show you another one. This one. Another congregation. This is them telling the story of their congregation. They have the total budget. You see, it's not line item. This is their total budget, but here go the categories: pastoral ministry, music and worship, mission and church, Christian formation, administration, and facilities. And if you notice, they telling the story: spiritual growth, community outreach, mission, service. And they saying we're growing in mission. So they're telling the story of the congregation, creating memory in the minds of their parishioners. Here's another one. No, that was the last one. And so remember, with narrative budgets, we are creating memory for our parishioners. And I want to open it up for questions. Frank, we have time for questions?
You. If I may say so, we do have examples. If people want to email me their address, or I'll do a follow-up email for everybody that signed up. And if you want, we have some samples that we can send out to folks also, and Excel spreadsheets and Word documents, different ways. So.
Okay, I just want to show this. This was
good.
Yeah, this was His United Methodist Church. And this right here was the first page of that narrative budget. You see where they have 2015 narrative operating budget. So they are sharing their narrative budget with the congregation. They sharing their budget with the congregation. It has their mission, their it says our process. They go our mission, our process. And then the next slide is what was inside of how they shared their budget to their congregation. I think there was a question. I'm going to stop the share.
Okay.
Okay, and see if we have any questions in the chat.
Well, one of the questions is, will this presentation be available to everyone? So the answer is yes. We'll have the recording of the webinar, and we'll also have a copy of Twanda's slides, as well as some examples of the narrative budgets up on our website. And because you registered for this webinar, we have your email addresses, and we will send you the link. We're at midatlanticfoundation.org. Under our archived events, you'll be able to find today's presentation. And as I said, we'll send you an email with those details.
And we'll send you the contact for the next 3 programs also too. So you've got it all together. Make it easy for you.
Yep.
Twana, this is great. I think a lot of times it's so overwhelming. You think it's so much to do. I've talked to several pastors that have seen your presentation and walked through it. And once they got the Excel spreadsheet, then converting it, and gets to be a lot of fun when you talk about what I really want to highlight, right?
Frank, it does. And it can seem overwhelming in the beginning, but I want to encourage the pastors that if you don't have the background in finances, find somebody in your congregation, because you might have somebody in your congregation who's good at Excel spreadsheets. And it might not be your finance chair or somebody that's working in finance, but you might have somebody who's very good at Excel spreadsheets, and they're willing to put it together. All they need is the numbers, and they're willing to put it together for you.
That's good.